I'd like to firstly acknowledge the sacred and beautiful land that we stand on today. To the King of Rarotonga, his people, and the King's representative today, Sir Thomas Masters and Lady Masters. To the U.S. Envoy to the Pacific Islands Forum, retired Ambassador Frankie A. Reid. Your Excellency, Ms. Phoebe Smith, Australian High Commissioner to the Rarotonga, Kiri Stevens, First Secretary of the New Zealand High Commission to Rarotonga, and to Samoa's High Commissioner to New Zealand, Awhionga Awhamasanga Toleafoa, who is also our former chairman of Pacific Farm Organizations. It is good to see you here today. To our development partners, Mr. Kandra Sametko, Country Director of IFAD, Ms. Karen Mapusua, Director of Land Resources Division of the Pacific Community, and your colleagues. Special greetings to our esteemed guests from Hawaii, led by Dr. Tusi, the Princess. You have a power of knowledge where you come from, and we are very lucky here in the Pacific to have you today. Thank you for accepting the invitation, for your continued support for our people in the Pacific, and our condolences to the people of Lahaina in Maui for the many lives lost in the recent fires. To friends and families who are here today, and last but not least, to the most important group of people in the House, our farm organization members. It gives me great pleasure as incoming chairman to welcome you all to this important week of action. I've been told we have 75 representatives from around the world attending this week-long event. As farmers, we are not used to this kind of attention, but it is good to know that our voices are being heard loud and clear, and from afar. Many moons ago, we were but a small, humble group of farmers sitting around a room discussing issues no one knew anything about or even cared about. Today, climate change is changing how we react to issues farmers face on a daily basis. Our cries are now increasingly heard and listened to by governments around the region and even at the United Nations office. As we all know, development work is not easy, and ensuring its sustainability, especially in rural communities, is a tall task to ask of anyone. Your presence here today is acknowledging a different path for development, and for that, I thank you all. A path that puts local people and local solutions at the center. We are convinced that this is the development model, and by the presence of governments, traditional leaders, researchers, and farmers from 14 countries, we can see that we are not the only ones that believe in this model. Together, we believe we can build a stronger tomorrow. I look forward to listening and learning from some of the great minds we have in the room today, and I wish you all a successful week of sharing and gathering of ideas that will go a long way to helping achieve many of our unsolved challenges in the Pacific and beyond. I'd like to end by acknowledging Te Tango Whenua, to Mr. Danny Mataroa and your many helpers whom have been so kind in looking after us on our arrival at the airport. Our Pacific way of love and sharing is strong here in the Cook Islands. I represent everyone here today in saying thank you to you all. And finally, a big thank you to our Secretariat Office, to Carl and the team both in Fiji and Hawaii. You have been working tirelessly in the background over the last year in preparing for this week. It hasn't been easy, but we've made it. And on that note, I wish a wonderful day and a week ahead. God bless and malo apito.
Thank you, Mr. Nishi. We had the privilege of visiting Mr. Nishi's cooperatives and family factory in Tonga. We'll know more about that later on when he makes a presentation. At this time, we'd like to invite the U.S. Envoy to the Pacific Islands Forum, U.S. Ambassador, retired Frankie A. Reed, to say a few words. Thank you.
Kia ora. I bring warm greetings from the U.S. side of the House and would like to acknowledge respect in being in the presence of the government of the Cook Islands, excellencies, distinguished guests, traditional leaders. I'm very happy to be here, and it's not my first time, but I'm returning after 12 years. I was here during the Pacific Island Forum. We came in from Washington and brought about 500 of our best friends. I promise that's not what we're trying to do this time. But we very much appreciate the warm reception that we had back then when we came with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And a thank you to the women of the Cook Islands who took me around my first evening here when I broke away from some of my political colleagues, who were all men at the time, with the exception of Secretary Clinton, and gave me a tour of a lot of the traditional areas here. I have not forgotten. As a former Peace Corps volunteer, perhaps I was a bit too comfortable last night, and I just arrived, and I jumped in a taxi and went out to a night market because I didn't know if I would have the opportunity again. I got there, and the taxi was supposed to pick me up. It never came back. The good thing about the islands, and I've been around for many years in various countries, is that you're never alone, and someone always bails you out. In this case, it was Dr. Tusi, thank you very much, who saw me there, and I had not seen in quite some time, and brought me back to the hotel. I come here with that type of background because we started working, when I say we, US government sent me to FSM, Federated States of Micronesia, with only one colleague many years ago to set up for what was then the South Pacific Forum. And the foreign minister, who was then Asterio Takesi, took our assistant secretary fishing. He has never forgotten that. He still has the picture of this huge fish, and we doubt how he caught it, but no one is asking, on the wall. And it's that relationship that the US has had, although understandably in and out over the years. What does an envoy do? I'm the first. So what I'm doing is, while I live in Honolulu, I'm based at the US Embassy in Fiji, which is what I call my old embassy, where I used to serve. And we're working on establishing the position to better communicate, specifically with the Pacific Island Forum, and to explain what the US is trying to do, and at the same time to make sure that that matches with some of the demands, requests, needs that we're getting from the many forum members, including the Secretary General, who was here at the time when I came 12 years ago. So it's old friends having a discussion in a certain respect. I'm a lawyer by profession and a journalist, and it's interesting because 3 days ago when I left Fiji, we just opened the regional headquarters of the US Agency for International Development. That agency shut down shortly after I left Fiji in 2015, and it didn't shut down completely. There were offices in Fiji and in Papua New Guinea. But this time, it's being opened on a much, much larger scale with an appropriate budget, in my view, and the staff to carry it out. They're starting with 30 members and eventually will increase to 55 to 70. It's large and it's regional. And the idea is seriously cover the region, because yes, we've heard the concerns, and I had concerns during the time I served in Fiji, that we were not seen often enough. But to backtrack, after Ponape, I came back to the Office of Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Island Affairs, and I had previously worked for a California congressman who was on the Asia and Pacific Subcommittee. And I say to backtrack because that experience, where it was Congressman Mavenga, Samoa, American Samoa, who taught me the islands. And I say that in the sense that how to better communicate and how to listen, which is even more important, I find. We used to argue about everything. And at the time, we were moving into compact negotiations. But it was Congressman Mavenga who, when I was up for my hearing before Congress to go out as ambassador to Fiji, he came across the aisle, out of the House of Representatives, over to the Senate, and spoke on my behalf. And for those of you who may have known him or remember, he never stopped talking, and by the time he finished talking, the Senate was too tired to ask me any questions. I remember him fondly, as I do many others who have been significant in helping me as I've moved along in my career. But that said, after that, I went out to Samoa as the US representative. I was the number 2, the deputy chief of mission under, who was then Carol Moseley Braun, a senator, who was the ambassador in New Zealand. And she came over along with then Diane Watson, who was our ambassador in Micronesia, to Samoa to offer their support. And I'm tracing this circle because I think people are important in moving an agenda, but they remember you, whether it's for better or for worse. But also to show the long-standing commitment that the US has had, and many may have forgotten because, yes, there have been political times, and that's my area, politics, where the US has not been perhaps as present as we would have liked. But in opening the USAID office, the embassy in Fiji also has been supporting the opening of other embassies, most recently Tonga, but also with plans to open in many other countries. And I'm just coming off of another visit to Papua New Guinea, where Secretary Blinken went out to raise our concerns and also to offer US support in what is a serious commitment. You see in terms of the visits, and that's what I used to do in Washington, the Secretary of State visits, presidential visits. It looks like a big splash, and it is, but at the same time, it's a commitment, and it's real resources being delivered. And I hope to have a chance to discuss some of that with you all today. But I'm very, very pleased to be back. It's been quite a journey, and I look forward to listening and working with you all in the future, and to coming back in November for the Pacific Island Forum. Thank you.